You're listening to the Rent Roll Radio Show with Sterling Chapman. Hey, Rent Roll Radio listeners, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Sterling Chapman, and I'm here today with our special guest coming in from New Zealand, Hadar Orkibi. He is the founder of mfiholdings.com, and he's also the founder of mihmastermind.com. Hadar, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Sterling. I'm excited to talk to you this morning.
Awesome. So let's just kick it off by telling us, why should we listen to you? What experience do you have in the real estate investing world?
I've been investing in real estate for nearly 2 decades now. Really started as a real estate agent in Israel in the early 2000s, and then we immigrated to New Zealand. I started as a wholesaler and learned a lot of the guerrilla marketing, if you like, and strategies which you deploy when you have no, deals that you need to do with no money down, a lot of contemporaneous closing and assignments and things like that, which really propelled me into eventually, after a few years of doing that, building my own buy and hold portfolio. These days, I specialize in investing out of area. I built a significant portfolio in New Zealand of residential and commercial real estate, and concluded in the last pretty much maybe 7 or 8 years of my investing that my portfolio is doing great. There's a lot of equity in it. The cash flow is good because I entered the market early enough, but for me to grow my cash flow and my passive income to the level which I desire to be, I had to look further afield. One of the reasons is the market that I invest in New Zealand really matured. So the cap rates have compressed and the returns shrinked to a level that when you want to buy a new property now, a new asset, you're basically acting and walking in a market which is a bit more like Boston, New York, Los Angeles, 3 to 4 cap rates. So that propelled me into getting myself educated and really looking into the US. Being an American citizen, I'm able to do business in the US, travel regularly, and of course, borrow money, which is the key element for being able to make business over there.
So what type of assets are you investing in the U.S.?
I focused on multifamily apartment building. Currently, I'm looking up to about 100 units, below 100 units. I'm focused on property which are kind of distressed. So mom and pop owners, I like to see typically assets which are 1970s or younger. We like to see assets which has enough meat on the bones. So we're targeting assets which has potential to add value to. The easiest way to add value to income producing real estate, such as multifamily, is properties which has enough loss to lease. Loss to lease is pretty much the current rent that you're receiving and where can you take it to achieve market rent. For example, if you have a property which is generating $100,000 a year in income, for example, and you can take it out to market, which is generating $150,000 a year. So that $50,000 difference, this is the loss to lease. So if you find an asset which is under rented, this is the easiest way to add value to. So we're looking for this type of opportunities, and also opportunities when we can reduce expenses and generate a higher income by increasing the rent, reducing expenses, which the bottom line of the NOI will be higher. And that's how we create better cash flow and better equity growth as well.
Awesome. So you told me when we were talking before the show that you have 56 units in America. Is that a single 56 unit complex?
No, I started buying to get my feet wet, if you like. I started buying smaller multifamilies. I started buying fourplex and triplexes. One of the reasons for that is because I wanted to test the market and test the people, which I created teams on the ground. I wanted to test them on smaller deal in opposed to go and buy a larger community or something and make mistake on a larger deal. So I felt more comfortable to start on these assets. And gradually I built a portfolio of 56 units comprised of 2 fourplexes, 1 triplex, and I just recently purchased another 45 unit community, which was a great deal, and I'm still now in the process of repositioning it. So that brings up the 46 unit. And of course, I got actually another deal in the hopper, which potentially will take me to my goal, which will be 100 units self-funded in the US. I self-fund those deals in the moment. I'm using my own resources, and sold the property in New Zealand to deploy the capital in the US, just to get the ball rolling organically so I can reach to 100 units on my own, be very close to my income goal, which I wanted to achieve in the US. And I'm very close to that. So it's very exciting times.
Awesome. And I'm glad that you mentioned self-funded, because I interview a lot of apartment syndicators on the show, and they throw around a lot of numbers like, I have 3,000 doors, I have 4,500 doors. And really what it boils down to is they own about 0.5% of those. So having 100 doors that you've self-funded and is all yours, that's a huge accomplishment. So definitely see the difference there. Where are these properties located?
I'm primarily investing in Central Arkansas, in the Central Arkansas market.
Okay.
This is the market that I'm focused on.
So somewhere between Fayetteville and Little Rock?
Central Arkansas is basically Little Rock and all the areas around it, up to about Conway, and then you go south, you go up to around the Hot Spring and that area there, which is about an hour each side pretty much from Little Rock in a radius.
So how did you pick that market?
Initially, I looked into the US in general. I looked into Memphis. I have some friends in New Zealand who bought single-family houses and small multi-families in Memphis. When I visited Memphis, I met with some people who invest over there and property managers and a few other fellow investors through bigger pockets. I went to a meetup and I even joined the local RIA over there just to part of the networking. And I felt that the market there was pretty competitive, was very competitive. A lot of money coming up from California, from the East Coast. And I just didn't feel enough traction in it. And I also felt that Memphis is really a market that you have to know the location street by street. Because There are some blocks there. You can go a block to the right in a good area and it will be a war zone.
Right.
So while I was there on if you like, a business trip, I rented a car and I drove all the way to Little Rock and spent some time over there with some friends, which I, again, met on Bigger Pockets. A great resource to use.
I actually just got off, before this interview, I interviewed Scott Trench, the CEO of Bigger Pockets.
Great guy. He's a great guy, and he likes rugby, and we had a couple of discussions about rugby. He's a rugby player too. So
he was just telling me about his injuries.
Yes. He's a good guy. He's promising me he's going to come to New Zealand, but he's always putting it off. It's people in the States that New Zealand is far, but in reality, it's only 13, 14 hours. It's just one flight. But nevertheless, I like Little Rock. I like the Central Arkansas market. I like the people. I felt like I can manage the market in terms of getting to know it really intimately. And I went to work. I formed relationship with the fellow investors, with the property management company, of course, which is the number one key important asset that you need to have in terms of relationship on the ground when you are looking to invest in out of your area, which is what I specialize in. And of course, local lenders. Another very important point is to establish a relationship with those local lenders, because they will be the one that will fund the deal. That's a process that took me now, 3.5 years to get established over there.
Awesome. So you flew in and you studied the market in person. You walked the streets yourself. You met the property managers in first. So you're not investing from afar, sight unseen.
Absolutely not.
Are you now that you've observed the markets and you trust your property managers and you trust your local boots on the ground, are you now willing to buy something that you haven't seen, or do you fly over and look at something every time you think about buying it?
I always visit the property when I buy it. I mean, I had one situation which I didn't. I had a couple situations in my close to 20 years experience in real estate. One was in New Zealand because I knew the area intimately, and it had to be a very quick transaction with a cash offer, cash unconditional, no contingency offer. And I bought that, and that was a big success. And actually, a year and a half ago, I bought something which I knew the area roughly, but I was there, and then the deal came back in, and I didn't come for the closing. And that deal is a property which I bought. But whether I've seen it or not, there was a lot of hidden cost in it. I would have bought it even if I've seen it, but I wasn't there. I was just drove through it. I didn't actually walk all the unit. These two were the only properties I did. One worked out well because I did knew the area intimately and in New Zealand and the broker, and the other one didn't work out so good because adjusting the demographic and the location was a bit challenging. But that wasn't to the fact that I didn't see it. I think it was more to the fact that that particular demographic, I did not knew it really well. It was a little bit outside of Little Rock in an area which demographic is not as good there. So, that's a good lesson learned. I'm not going to touch that particular area in the future. And I got a lot of offers, a lot of opportunity to buy apartments there for attractive prices. But, I don't want to be in it. So I'm happy that I actually purchased a fourplex over there, and I got a great deal. So I'm still making good money, and I'll sell it with a profit. But, it's really important to get to know your area and just stick to your areas that you really know the demographic.
I have a fourplex in an area that I would never buy in again. And the fourplex itself is beautiful, but the area is terrible. And one of the lessons I learned through that process is don't just go look at your property at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. Go buy at 6 o'clock on a Friday night.
6 o'clock on a Friday night, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and when it's raining as well.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you can see where the water is standing, whether there is leaks, and whether the asset is actually going to perform in every type of situation. One thing is for sure, if you're looking to invest in out of area, you need to be prepared to travel a lot. So I travel to the US probably 3 or 4 times a year, not just being a business expense, but I go there, I land, and then have an itinerary of back-to-back appointments with all of the professionals in the industry that I'm going to meet, whether it's for relationship or whether it's to take a deal down, which I need to do part of the due diligence. And I just really utilize my time to the best of my ability in terms of working from about 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, really making the most of that time. If I'm traveling from New Zealand 13, 14 hours and then flying to, for example, to any market from Houston or wherever you go, if you need to travel 4 or 5 or 3 hours or drive 2 hours, this is something that you can do because you are in the United States.
Absolutely. So let's back up for a minute. Can you tell us about your first deal and how you got interested into real estate in the first place and kind of what that first deal looked like?
In my investing, you mean in, close to 20 years ago? Or
Sure. I would imagine it's not that different, or am I wrong? Does real estate work the same way in Israel, or?
Well, in Israel, it's a different story. In Israel, I had a house which I bought and I kind of renovated it and ended up selling it. But I wasn't really an investor. I was more of an agent. When I immigrated to New Zealand in the early 2000s, the real estate cycle globally, if you like, was really on the upstream. Anything from 2003 up to about 2006, globally, that was a very strong bubble, and that triggered the GFC as well. I mean, the GFC, the availability of free funds, triggered the bubble in the United States. And we also in New Zealand and in Europe, there were no doc and low doc loans, which mean everybody that could fog a mirror could get loans. And that was one of the key drivers, if you like, for the last real estate bubble that we had before the global financial crisis. So back then, there was a lot of hype on real estate, and I gradually got myself educated to start being a wholesaler and all of that. And I realized that I don't want to be a real estate agent again like I was in Israel, and I want to be an investor. So I want to be on the other side of the spectrum because the real money is made investing long-term and building wealth through real estate. So started as a wholesaler to build my capital and my down payments, and gradually I was wholesaling and seeing all those deals which I couldn't buy. I decided to pull the trigger on a property which, again, was out of my area. Apart from one strip mall commercial real estate triple net lease, which I have here where I live in central Otago in the South Island of New Zealand, apart from that, I do not own any property here. Apart from that, and of course the family home, I do not own any property here. So I've been investing out of area for always, pretty much. I'm used to it. I know how to build teams. Something that I had to do from necessity to invest in bigger markets that had better opportunities. So initially, I read the book and I got myself educated, and I learned about buying assets which you can add value to. So initially, I looked into houses that had big backyards when you can potentially develop or perhaps build multiple dwellings or subdivide and sell some and do it that way in terms of, if you like a small development.
Sure.
Because they will always go in value if you're able to increase the density on the land, which is true. But they are not cash flowing as good as a multiple income property. Multiple income property, whether it's a duplex, triplex, quad, or 50 units or 100 units, First, they cash flow much better. Second, they are less risky because if you have a vacancy, you still have other units paying you the rent. Mm-hmm. And when you take it to the next level, which is a US kind of multifamily apartments, it goes into commercial, and you can really push the equity by manipulating the returns in terms of adding value to the rent and decreasing expenses, and you can create value. But when I started, I did not know that. So I was focusing on houses with big backyards. And quickly enough, I figured out that I deployed all the money that I saved and put into those houses, waiting for them to perhaps go in value or maybe making more money so I can develop those sites. But I got to the point when I wasn't able to service any more debt because they were not cash flowing enough. They were maybe 6 cap or 5 cap. And back then in the 2000s, the interest rate were somewhere around 6 to 7 to 8 to 9%. So they were just breaking even. And I got to the point when I was leverage locked. Leverage locked means that you cannot leverage anymore, you cannot borrow anymore. And gradually I networked with other investors and realized also in New Zealand that I need to shift my focus into multiple income properties, which would be small multifamily, because in New Zealand there's no large multifamilies like 10 unit, 50 unit, 20 unit, 100 unit. There's not a lot of multifamilies like that in New Zealand. So the only thing that is available are small multifamilies. And that's what I focused on here. And my portfolio in New Zealand is all now comprised. I sold those houses, and it's all now comprised of multifamily and some commercial real estate.
Awesome. So can you tell us about your biggest home run, your most successful investment?
I had a couple. I can tell you about 2 of them. The first one was in New Zealand. I bought a 4-plex in Auckland, and that was in 2012. So the timing was right. You know, it was a home run because I got the timing right, and it was a good deal. I bought a 4-plex for a really good deal, and I did what we call a condo conversion. In the US, you call it condo conversion. It's basically taking those 4 units and subdividing them, separating the titles and separating the utilities, which will allow you to potentially sell the units separately, the apartment separately, or appraise them separately. So once it's on separate title, it does not appraise like you do a commercial real estate based on the return. It could appraise separately, which will bump the rent. In those days, you know, they were kind of based on the return. Although 4 units. In New Zealand, they were based on the return, just the way investor. It was an investment stock. Only investor would buy it. There was no house hacking or anything like that. You know, home buyers would not consider buying those properties, only investors. So I've done that. I was all in about 1 million, 1.1 or something like that. And I ended up selling it for close to 2 million.
Oh, wow.
But I knew I'm going to create significant equity out of it. But when I did my underwriting, I knew I'm going to create maybe 300 grand. But because the timing was so good, the market just started increasing. And that 300 grand that I knew I'm going to be able to create by doing the condo conversion turned up to be 900. Awesome. So I sold the properties. Unfortunately, in New Zealand, there is no 1031 or like-kind exchange. And I sold it in one package. I did not end up sending them separately. I sold it in one package for an investor who bought it, the whole lot. There is no like-kind exchange in New Zealand or 1031 exchange, so I had to pay a lot of tax on it, which I did.
What does the tax bill look like that in New Zealand?
Close to 30%.
True.
Yeah.
So you ended up paying in taxes what you had originally underwritten that you were going to make.
Yes, because the rent did not keep up with the equity. You see, I created all that equity, but the rent did not keep up with that. So at the end of the day, I was in a situation that I got this equity, and what is the best use of the capital? What is the best use of the money?
Sure.
If you want to improve the velocity of money, in my view, I made a decision. I thought about it for a long time, and I made a decision to pay the taxes, pull the money out. What I did is that I used that money, I used those profits, if you like, to pay down debt on the commercial real estate that I own, which I basically is now mortgage-free as an unencumbered and is generating a significant amount of cash flow per year, which allows me and my family to live a lifestyle by design, if you like, and have some significant passive income, which it's really helpful. You see, up to that point, I was wholesaling, I was trading, buying, renovating, and selling, and I was building my portfolio, but nothing was really generating significant cash flow, which will allow me to have that base of income that I know that we are secured, if you like. And by doing that, I pulled the equity out and pay down debt on the commercial real estate that generate what for most people will be more than annual wage, yearly salary.
Awesome. Love to hear that.
And the second home run, Sterling, is my latest deal in the United States, which I don't know how long you want me to go on that, but it's a great deal. It's a 45 units apartment community with about 35% loss to lease, meaning that there was a massive upside in the rent. I think the rent roll there was about 120,000 at the most because of the vacancies, because of the low rent. I'll be taking it up to about 315 once it's stabilized. So awesome. I think that.
How did you find it? How did you pay for it? How much did you put down?
Okay, so very good question. This particular deal was about 18 months in the making. I initially did a marketing campaign, direct mail marketing campaign. Then I follow up with cold calling. So now I will be tweaking it a little bit big. I'll add another middle stage, which I was discussing and putting it together for one of our students in the MIH mastermind that Marco and I are running. So it will be like, now I will do it differently. And I want to make that point because we are evolving as investors. We're finding different tools to make things better. So first will be letter, then it will be a voice drop plus text message at the same time. Then it will be a follow-up with a cold call because you want to do the automations first. Then you do a follow-up and a cold call, and then you will do even a door knock if you have to. So that will be the last resources if you need to. So I've done a letter, and then I've done a cold calling, and then I've done an email as well because I have access to...
Do you ever tell them when you knock on the door that you flew 13 hours to come see them?
Usually, we hired the door knocker in New Zealand for a while, and we gave him the script and everything. But in the States, I did not have to do a door knocking so far. I kind of created a list, a super list, if you like. I take it from different resources and put a list together. And using the right tools, I have the ability to have people's cell phones, emails, and bits and pieces, which allows me to interact with them. So I rang someone about this deal, which was listed as the owner. That wasn't the owner. There was a lady over there, and I told her, and I got my own spiel, which I stick to, and it goes something along the lines that, hi, my name is... When I ring them, I say my name because I'm not going to lie. But in my letter, actually, I don't mention my name first. I use friends of my name because I want it to sound local. So he says, hi, my name is Paul ABC. We are investing locally in the community. We're looking to grow our portfolio, and we'd like to know if you consider selling the property in XYZ. And that's the letter.
You can get away with using Paul on the letter, but the accent would have probably given you away if you...
Yeah, but the letter says, hi, my name is Paul. My business partner, Hadar Orkibi, and I are interested to invest. No, because if you say Hadar Orkibi, and I got this feedback from one of the people who received the letter, and then I ended up talking to them on the phone, and even they invited me to the home, and we sat and talked. They own about close to 300 units in my market, and we kind of building the relationship. They told me, when we read your name and all of that, we didn't know if we, who is it? It could have been somebody from like a Middle East or something, they don't know exactly if they want to deal with someone like that. People got their own decision to make. So anyway, that's fine. I left a message. She said he's going to ring me. They never rang me. Then I sent an email saying, hey, I'm interested in this community. Would you consider selling? Long story short, a broker rang me, a broker that works with a family to sell some other asset, commercial asset, industrial stuff. And we started forming a relationship, forming a rapport. They wanted 1.6 million for this, which is a price which I knew it's not going to work because of the rents, 20% vacant. It's too much. It needs too much work, and it's not going to pass service. The debt to cover ratio will be something you can't work with. So we negotiated for a while. Long story short, I ended up buying it for $1.05 million. If anybody wants to hear the whole story, they are welcome to jump on my website, which is mfiholding.com. And there is a link to the movers and
You just cut out, your connection just cut out. So I'm going to repeat that so that our listeners can hear it. He said the Movers and Shakers podcast. It's a Jake and Gino production for which you are a coach, correct?
Yeah, I'm coaching. I'm an accountability coach for Jake and Gino as well. I done the Movers and Shakers podcast number 28. If you want to listen to that, you can listen to the whole story about this particular deal. And you got a link on my website for that as well, on the mfiholding.com website.
Awesome. Yeah, we love Jake and Gino on the show. We've interviewed Gino, and we talk to Josh all the time. That's who introduced us, is it not? Yeah.
Yes.
So great group. I love everything you guys are doing over there. Do you have a deal for us that maybe didn't go quite as well as planned, like something that you lost money on or was kind of a disaster?
Yes, absolutely. I have a couple of examples for you. Around 2015, I bought a 3-unit site. So it's a house with potentially to subdivide for another 2 lots on the house. I bought that in Auckland, New Zealand with a friend of mine. We wanted to develop this property. And what happened there was that we hired a planner to help us out with the zoning because it was a tricky site. We had to get a special zoning approved to be able to develop the site. But also at that time, the whole of the Auckland city was going through a rezoning and a new, if you like, plan for the zoning to take place. So there was a lot of unknown in the zoning rules and all that through the different planners. I'm not going to get into that in details, but the long story short, apart from that, we paid a significant amount of money to architects that had great ideas about those townhouses that we're going to build over there. But the materials that they used and the charges that they charged us just to get the permit was significant. Was I think about $40,000 or something, all out for the whole thing. And at the end of the day, we got the plans approved, but we couldn't build it for a price that would make sense because all the materials and everything they designed was a very high-end spec. So then we start looking on different costs and different material, maybe change the plans. But that aside, the market there changed pretty much within few months, maybe 2 or 3 months, because the New Zealand government introduced a loan-to-value restriction at some point that if you're not buying your own home, you have to bring 30% down. So it's basically 70% loan-to-value, and then it went down to 40. So when it went down to 40, that really made it difficult to develop the site and also to find a buyer that will buy it with the plans. And apart from that, we had a neighbor, which was really just an adjoining neighbor, and he had an easement to drain his sewage line into our piece of sewage that we had running through our property all the way to the mains. And we needed him to sign that he allows us to move the sewage lines from the middle of the section to the boundary so we can build over it, if you like, not to build over it. And he was all right in the beginning. Verbally, he said, yeah, no problem, whatever. And then he ended up stringing us along for like a year. And we have holding costs, we're paying interest. We had a lot of stress because you don't know if you're going to be able to do it because he was stringing us along for a year and he was not communicative and really difficult to work with. I ended up being very persistent and very, very patient. And in the end, we got it done. I managed to agree with him that we're going to pay him something for him to agree to sign it. And he did it. But it was very difficult time and it was very stressful as well. But it's a good lesson learned. I'm not looking to develop. At that point, I was anxious to get into a deal. I had the period of time that I kind of wanted to take opportunity of some capital and, if you like, take things to the next level by doing some development. But at that time, I decided that, I'll stick to what I know and I'm not I'll do small things, maybe one house here or there on the back section, but I'm not doing multi-unit development. The building cost is not something that I can sustain. And I see that in the US as well. A lot of people thinking about, we'll build multifamily, we can build multifamily. At the end of the day, if you are not the builder or general contractor yourself who can build it at 30% below what it's going to cost to build, the numbers are not going to stack up and you're not going to make any money. So if you're buying in the US at $110 per square foot, there's no money in it.
Right.
Stick to what you know. That's why I really now laser focus on the C and B asset type, which are value add. It's much easier It's not as complicated. And 90% of the time, you don't have to deal with the local authorities. When you deal with development, you're dealing with the local authorities. There's a lot of red tape, and it's a whole different ballgame and a lot of risk.
I'm waiting on some permits right now.
Yes. So you asked me in the beginning why people should listen to me. So I'm not proclaiming to be an expert of all the things, but I've done wholesaling, I've done flipping, I've done subdivision, condo conversion, I've done small new construction. I've been doing commercial real estate and joint ventures for, over 15 years. So I got the experience, which leads me to believe that being laser focused on one thing is the best way forward. Saying that, I still flip houses because I got it automated. I got it automated in New Zealand. I got a contractor who I work with. He does everything turnkey for me now, and I just need to monitor the expenses and have the first concept. So I still do it for cash flow. But if you can automate it and you can have your criteria nailed down and you don't deviate from them, then you can do it. If it's something that you got it systemized. But I truly believe in laser focusing on what you want to do and get on with it.
Awesome. So that brings us into our next question. What's your advice for any real estate investors or potential real estate investors that are out there looking to get started? What does that 20 years of experience and wisdom have to offer? What would you tell them?
The first thing I will say is education. When I started, there was no podcast. There was not a lot of ways to learn apart from reading books and listening to some CDs or MP3 players or whatever I could do when I was walking in the vineyard and the orchards of Central Otago. So the first thing is education. Don't be afraid to pay a coach like a Jake and Gino community, like a coaching system like Jake and Gino offer, or joining a mastermind like Marco and I run, the MIH mastermind, because that could really save you a lot of money at the end of the day. It's basically you're learning from people who had experience to prevent you making the same mistake. So that's the first thing. Again, another point, avoid the shiny object syndrome. Stay focused on one thing. Don't start jumping from one thing to the other, because if you want to get results, you have to focus on one thing. Focus on one market and be open to invest out of area. If you're living in a market which doesn't stack up, learn how to invest out of area and make it happen. And always remember, if I can do it from New Zealand investing in the US, you can do it too. And if you really want to learn it, reach out to me. I got a free ebook that I can share with you in a video course that will really give you the foundation to invest out of area. And you can find that on my website, mfiholding.com. Another point is know your market. If you decide to invest out of area or in your area, or maybe 2-hour drive from your location, get to know your market. You really need to become present in the market. You need to learn the streets. You need to learn the players. You need to know who are the owners that owns large portfolios or maybe a cluster of 4plexes or 10plexes in the area, and get to know the lenders in your market. The lenders are very, very important part in your market. They need to know you. Establish those relationships earlier. Open an account with them. Perhaps get a secure credit card or a credit card and start building that credit with them. Very, very important. Network, create those relationships, attend meetup, and just be present in that market. And the last point I would like to mention, which is very important, and that's taking you back to my first deal, buy property with value add potential that you can generate yield and equity at the same time. Because if you buy an asset where you can manufacture equity and creating cash flow, you're setting yourself up to success. And if you don't, you're just not going to be able to grow your real estate business as efficiently, as fast as you could if you create those foundations. So those are the points. Education, avoid shiny object syndrome, focus on one market, get to know that market, network with all the professionals in the industry in your market, and buy value add with yield properties.
Well, I think that's the most comprehensive answer I've ever gotten to that question.
You're making it happen here.
Awesome. So moving on, we're just going to finish out with our radio round. So real quick, what's your favorite book?
I have I read a lot of books. If you want to add another thing is always continue educating yourself. I always read, I always listen to podcasts. I always try to learn more. we don't know everything. You always have to get yourself educated. So I always refer to real estate, multifamily books, but now I'm reading a book which was sitting on my shelf for maybe 5 years, and I did not pick it up. I kind of look at books and I get them to call me to read them. You know, they're saying that the book will call you. I buy books, and then when the time is right, they come.
I do the exact same thing. I had a book sitting on my shelf for 8 years before I read it, but I read it.
And the book that I'm going to tell you now, you probably know it. Like I said, it was on my shelf for a long time, and I just picked it up, and it's called Sales Dog by Blair Singer, which is a real estate advisor for Robert Kiyosaki. He's one of the first advisors and good friends of Robert, and it's all about sales, and he characterized salespeople with dog characters. So you got the Chihuahua, you got the Golden Retriever, you got the Poodle, and you got the Bull Mastiff, and you got the Basset Hound, and all those, which is really interesting because it makes you think about sales and people in a way that you can understand the approach, how to become a better salesperson, and even just talk to people. For example, if we talk, I got one of the students we have in the mastermind, he needed a bit of tweaking with the way he deal with his off-market deals. And, I gave him the book, I told him to read the book, and it's really helped them a lot to realize that perhaps he needs to tone down his Bull Mastiff and become a little bit more Golden Retriever. And he's a dog lover as well. So it really resonated with them.
Awesome.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
I'll definitely check it out, or I'll at least buy it and put it on my shelf to read in 5 years.
Good. Absolutely.
What's your favorite quote?
I got a few quotes for you, and I like to share them with you. The first quote, which always came to mind, is "You fail to plan, you plan to fail," which is Benjamin Franklin. I mean, if you want to get somewhere and you're not planning it, you're not going to get there, because you need to plan and see how you're going to get to where you're going to get. So if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's simple as that. Another quote, which I really, really like, and I think it's very important for real estate investors as a whole, and us now that, people are looking to make it happen and find deals, it's that: "In the middle of difficulty lies an opportunity."
Awesome.
By Albert Einstein. And this is really real estate. If you think about it, the difficulty will be a recession times. For example, when there is a recession, there's opportunities everywhere, okay? In life as well, sometimes you got crisis, you got stuff that teaches you to change things in your life, to make your life better, to maybe start better habits. So this quote, I like it a lot because it has a holistic approach for life as a whole.
Awesome. What's your favorite thing to do outside of work?
I like running. I'm a runner. I really like walking out, specifically running. I try and do a half a marathon every year or every second year.
I'm a runner as well.
Good.
I haven't run lately, but I've done 4 fulls and probably a dozen halves.
Good. Definitely. You know the feeling, though. It's addictive.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Well, awesome. Yes. So where can our listeners find you?
And I like yoga as well, and mountain biking, by the way. And of course, spend time with my family and travel the world and eat ethnic foods. That's really what I do. And I like to spend time with my kids' sports. I help to coach my son's rugby team, and it's something that I really enjoy. I pretty much proud to say that I hardly ever miss any of his games and coachings.
Awesome.
And my daughter as well.
And that's from the lifestyle that you designed from real estate investing. So that's
awesome. What we're here for. That's what we're here for. If anybody wants to touch base with us and perhaps connect with me, they can visit me on the mihmastermind.com website. We can perhaps put the link in the show notes. And I have a free ebook that I wrote that I can share with the listeners. It's called The Real Estate Cycle: Understanding the Different Phases and Strategies of Each Cycle. Because each cycle, each phase has a different strategies that you can apply in that particular phase of the cycle, whether you're in the boom, in the slump, in the recession, or in the recovery. So if you're interested in that book, which is very timely for where we are right now, jump on mihmastermind.com, click on the link above, and you'll get the book, no problem.
Awesome. Hadar, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great show. I learned a ton, and I'm sure our listeners did too. I can't wait to hear more about your progress in Arkansas.
Thank you, Sterling, and make it happen.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rent Roll Radio Show, brought to you by Crestworth Capital. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a rating and review. You can also visit us at crestworthcapital.com or rentrollradio.com, or follow us on Facebook at rentrollradio or at crestworth capital. If you would like to reach us, feel free to shoot us an email at info@rentrollradio.com or sterling@crestworthcapital.com. We hope you come back next week to join us on some more of our journey. Until then, happy investing.